The first step was not allowing my sister to yell at me and rant and rage and blame me for things that were out of my control. That was what upset me the most. I remember my therapist would be like, why do you have to take this? Why do you have to listen?
Welcome to Flood, Love of Recovery, where I'm your host, Dominique Zager. During each episode, I'll be joined by people who share their personal stories as it relates to their sibling substance use and how it has affected their family, or by professionals and advocates who can share their unique perspectives from a mental health, community advocacy, or cultural lens. Roles of siblings can be confusing, messy, and just one big gray area. They can be filled with what families expect of us, letting things slide, or putting other people first. But the role of a sibling will usually vary from person to person. Today, I'm joined by Gillian, a peer of mine and a fellow Naranon member, who'll be reflecting on her childhood experiences growing up with addiction in her family. We'll dive into what her relationship with her sister looked like when they were kids, how it evolved as her younger sister started using substances and struggled with her alcoholism, and how Gillian shows up for her sister today. Gillian, thanks so much for being on the show. I'd love for you to take a minute to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your family and what it was like during the early years of your childhood.
I am 53 years old, and I am the oldest sister in my family. I have one younger sister. She's 8 years younger than me. And growing up in my house, it was very difficult. It was either a lot of fighting or silence. And the fighting would be between my parents, and our parents would then pass it on to us, not talking to us. I learned now, as an adult who's been in therapy for about 7,000 years, that withholding, like not speaking, is a form of emotional abuse. And I dealt with a lot of that. With my sister, she was a handful, and I had more of the role of a caretaker because I was 8 years older than her. So from the very beginning, I would babysit her and take her places. And the ironic thing is my dad was a social worker, and it was the worst communication, passive aggressive. My mom was a nurse. They're both, professional. Doesn't matter. It was really difficult.
Yeah, it's interesting because you hear a lot about how your parents might heavily influence the relationships that you have with, your family and other people. And especially if your dad's a social worker and your mom's a nurse, you would hope and think that some of those caretaking skills that they have in the workplace come through in, your household. And you mentioned a little bit in the beginning about some of that silence that was ongoing. And I would love for you to talk a little bit more about how that affected you and your sister in the moment and what that dynamic was like between you two.
It affected me I thought it was my fault. I thought whatever was happening was my fault. I mean, I knew my parents' marriage, their struggles wasn't my fault, but the part of it that was happening when they were fighting and not speaking to me, I thought was my fault. I internalized everything. I always felt I was never good enough because, well, they're not speaking to me, so I must be doing something wrong. For my sister, she was 10 when my parents split up. I was 18. And I don't know how it affected her, but I know that she learned to use it as a tool as well. And she would use it against me when I didn't do something she wanted or she wasn't happy with something I said. She would not talk to me and shut me out. And that made me nuts. It made me so upset and so upset, so hurt. I couldn't handle it. I did just about anything to get her to talk to me. And she knew she was a kid, but she learned that's what you do,
Right.
To lash out. That's what she learned. So I guess I do have the answer. She learned that as a tool to lash out.
Yes. How did your parents help you navigate that with your sister and just, internalizing some of those feelings? Did they notice it? Did they How did they show up for you and or your sister when there was some of that lashing out going on?
They didn't. They were so wrapped up in their own troubled marriage that they didn't really try to navigate our relationship or help our relationship. I mean, it could have been a lot worse between my sister and I. It wasn't bad, growing up. We were each other's kind of life rafts in a way,
Right.
but they didn't help us at all. I don't think they could. They weren't capable. I probably crawled out of the womb looking for a therapist office. I use humor a lot, self-effacing humor mostly, to deal with all the issues life throws at you.
So you had mentioned that your parents weren't capable. They couldn't really help you as much as it sounded like they would have wanted to. What did that mean? Like, what do you
Yeah.
mean they weren't capable of doing that?
Well, my mother, she was born during World War II. And so she was raised in England post World War II, where they had nothing. And her father died when she was very young, like 10, and her mother suffered from deep depression. She pretty much likes to say she raised herself. She wasn't really given any tools how to deal with it. Growing up during that time, she remembers her house being bombed. She remembers those little ration books where you were allowed one chicken, two eggs, whatever, one orange a week. For Christmas, they would just get a stocking. They would get like an orange in the stocking.
Yeah.
That was Christmas. So she had enough to deal with growing up. Forget the emotional stuff, it was survival. But she did survive. What was wonderful about my mom was that later on in life, when I really got into therapy and I learned how to talk to her and try to guide her on topics of when I was a kid and a little bit of my sister and my parents' marriage, she was very open to it. And my father, oh, my father, he's still alive. We've reconciled. We didn't speak for about 5 years because he's a bit of a narcissist. I know that's a term thrown around, but for real, the therapist has really said, yeah, he's a narcissist. And very difficult, very manipulative. He manipulated my mother. It was his way or the highway. He had his own addictions. He was addicted to pornography, and he couldn't help me navigate anything. The greatest gift he ever gave me was when one year, maybe 10 years ago, Father's Day, we went out for lunch and I told him how his addiction and my childhood had really messed with me, to put that lightly. And he acknowledged it. He said, boy, I really fucked things up.
Right.
And that was one of the greatest gifts he's ever given me, the validation
Yeah.
of his role.
When a parent or an adult can take accountability for their actions, whether it positive or negative, even if sometimes that apology or that recognition comes late, I think it's much appreciated. And it sounds like for you, it created some kind of relief. Like, okay, like you do see what was going on. I wasn't totally just making it up.
He didn't remember when I told him all the things that he did. His actions, being an addict of pornography, really affects me emotionally and affects me in my relationships with men. He didn't remember all the things he did. He just believed me. That was it. He believed me. That was all I needed. And then we didn't talk for 5 years. But I think we're past that now. And if I wanted to talk about the past, I think he probably could, but I don't know if I want to. At this point I'm 53. I don't know.
Yeah, I totally hear you. It seemed like they were really in survival mode themselves. Like your mom, knowing her history growing up as an elder sibling, taking care of her family the best that she could, given her personal resources, and how that translated to your family and her relationship probably with your dad and your sister. It just seemed like they were doing the best they can with what they had. And that was their
Yes.
version of being as capable as possible in that moment.
It's empowering to be able to acknowledge that and to be able to say they did the best they could. Both of my parents. And it wasn't very good. But I survived. I took my mental health into my own hands.
Right. Yeah. And you mentioned you're about 8 years older than your sister. I'm 10 years older than my brother. So I totally get trying to be a little bit of like that third parent and wanting to protect and maintain a relationship and, make sure everyone is okay. How did you learn to show up for your sister or help her through childhood and adolescence and all that?
Well, I'm a teacher and I love children. And I think it's what I'm best at is being kind of a caretaker or, being with children. And so doing that with her, taking care of her, playing with her, being there for her was easy. But then it became harder because I was a teenager, had my own friends. I didn't want her around. And as I got older, like an adult, and then my sister became an adult, it became more of an enabling situation when her addictions really kind of kicked in. That kind of changed in her 20s, I would say, is when the anger turned. She became angry when she didn't get what she wanted. My mother was the major enabler, but showing up for her just kind of, you know what it looked like? It looked like doing what my mother said. That's what
Right.
I did.
You mentioned your sister started using in her 20s or so. What was that turning point? Like what did you notice when she started using? And do you know what spiraled that to occur?
I don't know when she started drinking. What it looked like to me, as well, not my family. My family doesn't have a problem. We don't have an alcoholic in the family. You know, well, yeah, you do. And I remember the line in the sand when I realized, but to me, it just looked like she liked to have a good time. But the pill addiction started to spiral, I think, in her 30s when she worked in a hospital and she got a lot of access. She was prescribed Xanax and that kind of stuff. Being there for her was just really, for the most part, doing what my mother asked me to do, and what she told, and what my sister, I should say, I asked, told me to do, what they both told me to do. I was the good girl. I did whatever anybody told me to do.
So what were some of those things that your mom had asked you or told you to do?
Just a small example. It was my birthday, and I was no closer to being married and having children, which is what I so desperately wanted. And I was really upset. And my mom knew it. I couldn't really talk to her about my dating life because she was very judgmental. So I kind of cut that conversation off with her. But, she kind of made the day about me, my birthday. I spent it with her. But somehow my sister's needs were also in there. Oh, well, let's just take your sister here. We got to take your sister there. And I was like, I'm standing here crying, like very hurt, and somehow still everything is about her, you know? That's how I felt. It was my mom. My mom had wanted us to take her to the DMV to get because otherwise I don't know if my sister would have done it in a timely fashion. And I was like, oh, we have to do this on my birthday? Like, who wants to go to the DMV on their birthday? It's just, yeah,
Well,
it's just very symbolic of my mother always trying to fix things, always trying to, well, let's get this done and it'll be okay. Let's do this for her. Let's get her car. Let's do this. And I got caught in the middle
right.
of it. When my sister got married, oh my God, that was a nightmare. It was a nightmare, not even because of my sister, but because of my mother. My mother was so controlling and just had to have everything just so. It was, what do they call it? Not, it was momzilla. It wasn't bridezilla. My sister was great. And it was like just an amplified version of my mom just trying to control and regulate my sister. I don't know if regulate's the right word, but trying to make sure her ducks were in a row because she knew at some level. I didn't realize until my mother was dying, which is 5 years ago. I did not realize my sister was an alcoholic until my therapist kind of gently suggested it to me. Everything kind of came crashing down during that time period for me. And when she said that, or when I realized that my sister not only was an alcoholic, but suffered from mental health issues, like, it's just like you're putting on glasses and you're looking at history like, oh, that's why she's drunk at every family function. And then my sister had my nephew 12 years ago. We were all so happy, and my sister did great. We all wanted to be there. My mother had been dying for a grandchild I'm pretty sure since she was born. So she was so happy beside myself. She knew she wasn't going to get one from me. And so she was getting her beloved grandchild. So she was over the moon. And I remember, and this is a story I think that you've heard me tell. I was in the ER. I had gotten severe food poisoning from clams, and I had to go to the hospital. I stayed there 2 nights, and I was waiting to be discharged. And my mother's calling me on my phone, telling me, you have to go to meet my nephew at the bus. Nobody can get a hold of my sister. She shut her phone off. There was some kind of communication problem where I had to be the one. My brother-in-law was working in New Jersey. I'm in the hospital, and I'm the one picking up my sister's son because she shut her phone off. You have a child, you can't really do that. But here's my memory of that. I'm being discharged. I've been in bed for 2 days on IV fluids. I had to run down the hall, run to my car to make the bus to meet my nephew. And I was like, what the fuck? Why am I doing this? I mean, happy to do it, but not so, So those kind of things, being there for my sister, kind of, she's called me a third parent in many ways. And that's a wonderful strength of hers, is that she acknowledges what a wonderful father her husband is. And she acknowledges my important role in my nephew's life. And that's amazing.
Yeah.
That's a gift. And I really appreciate that from her. She tries her best. So that's how my role looks like now, showing up for my sister.
Yeah, there's a lot going on there. It sounds like, while you were in the hospital and at other points in your life too, it's like your needs at that moment weren't seen because your sister and her experiences just demanded so much of that attention that your parents couldn't show up for you when they needed to because your sister needed just more attention, more help. And sounds like a lot of the times that person was you who was able to come and support her in whatever shape or form it might have been. And in my experience, I found sometimes it's hard to distinguish between when I'm helping versus when I'm enabling. And different sources might distinguish it in different ways, but generally it's considered a pattern of behavior that protects others from experiencing the full impact or consequences of their behavior. And while the enabler's intention is generally well intended, it continues to contribute to their loved ones' addiction or substance use. So, when have you personally found that doing that helping has actually caused more harm than good?
My sister would always get me to drive to weddings or to events. And so she could drink and get drunk and then perhaps lash out at me, which she has. That was a big thing for me. Like, it was really hard for me to say no, not to drive her places. It was just like, oh, well, you drive her. That's it.
Right.
So she could have a drink. It's like, what? And that's what I had a big problem with, but I still did it. I still drove her. I still ran to that bus, to pick up my nephew, because I think a lot more of it because of my mom. My mom was very controlling. So it was a combo of not wanting to disappoint my mother
Right.
and not want to receive my sister's wrath, because she could really lash out and blame you for things. She was just a master of blaming things, and she still does it. She just doesn't do it to me anymore because I've stopped it.
Right. So it becomes like a defense mechanism almost, like just going along with what your parent or the enabler might be doing or saying. And then you find maybe you're becoming the enabler because you just want to keep the peace a little, right? You don't want there to be retaliation against you or someone else. And it just continues to spiral while you're in the middle of it all.
1,000 billion jillion percent. Well said. Yes. Just trying to keep the peace.
Yeah.
Just trying to keep,
Try to be
you
Switzerland.
know, I think for, yes.
Yeah.
I think, for my mom, once my nephew was born, it was all about him and trying to make life good for him. But what was wonderful about my mother also is that my mother realized and trusted my role as an educator and trusted my advice and what I had to say about you should do this, you shouldn't do this. Even though she's a mother and I'm not,
Mhm.
she listened to me. And, in terms of my nephew, not in terms of my sister, but in terms of my nephew, she listened to me.
It's interesting because even like that mother-daughter relationship can be so unique, and you find yourself bonding with a parent, and you realize that and sometimes maybe it might look like you're almost the parent where that person is coming to you for support or advice. It's like, when do you put your hands up and you're like, wait, when did I become the expert in so and so field? And it's hard to acknowledge that role, but once you do realize it, that awareness can become like that first step and changing a little bit of that behavior.
With my sister, she's a know it all, and she is the one who gives the advice and tells you what to do. And she did not look for my
Right.
advice at all. And even in terms of education, now, did I enforce it sometimes? Oh, yeah, I did. My nephew is autistic. And when he was diagnosed, I really forced the issue of where he should go in terms of educational placement. And thank God they listened to me, and thank God I was right. But a little different dance. She didn't really ever come to me. She was the one who gave the advice. And she still tries to. And it's just like,
Yeah.
no.
One of the things we often hear
Yeah.
is not to do things for people, but to be things. What does that mean for your relationship with your nephew? And what do you hope to be for him?
As I said before, I always wanted to be married and have children of my own. Well, I'm not going to have children of my own. And it's okay. I'm a teacher. I got some maternal instincts out in the classroom. But also, if I had my own children, I wouldn't be able to be there as much for my nephew, monetarily and emotionally for my nephew, as I am currently. And again, what's wonderful about my sister is that she allows it. She's not too proud. She allows me to buy things for him, take him places. That's what it looks like is I bought a 2-bedroom apartment so that he could sleep over here and so I could have him come over for dinner once a week, have him sleep over here during the summer, during the school year, so that my sister and brother-in-law can have a respite and he can have some time with me. That's how I show up for my sister now. Sometimes she might ask me for a little money, not often. They don't have a lot of money. Sometimes I'll buy them food, not often because they're proud, but I'm happy to do that. But more so being there for my nephew, looking out for his needs. So that's how I show up for her now, is being there. And I know she appreciates it. And I know my brother in law appreciates it. But I've worked hard on those relationships by not telling them what to do, but like it's only approach. Our relationship has evolved
Right.
in a good way. It's never been better.
Oh, that's great to hear. So it sounds like you've been a constant figure for both your sister, your nephew, and just generally your family. Has there ever been a point where you've resigned from this role of being a helper? And what did that look like?
Well, I always used to say I'd like to move to New Zealand. I picked a place
Right.
very far away. Yeah, when things were really bad, I just wanted to get out of here and get away so that I would no longer have to be the caretaker. But I wouldn't do that because I wound up caring for my mom as she was dying that last year of her life. I looked into moving to Scotland because it's such a beautiful place. And I even got a teaching license for Scotland. but I just didn't follow through because I knew I had to be here for my family. So it was more of a fantasy. But through therapy, I've been able to draw boundaries. And that's my own kind of escape in a way. I'm not running to the bus stop anymore, but I'm not the person that she calls for those kind of situations because they're not happening at the moment, but they were still happening. And I'm not the first person she calls. And that's good. Yes, it's a big change. It is a big change.
What if some of those boundaries looked like while you were building them? Was there like a trial and error phase? Do you feel like when you found the right boundary, you were able to stick to it? And what was your family's reaction when you started building some of those boundaries?
Well, it's funny. My mother had to be dead for me to start with these boundaries, unfortunately. So that's one of them, death. It would have been a lot harder if my mom was alive. A lot harder. The first step was not allowing my sister to yell at me and rant and rave and blame me for things that were out of my control. That was what upset me the most. I remember my therapist would be like, Why do you have to take this? Why do you have to listen?
Right.
You know, somehow it stopped. She got the message. When she tries to tell me something, she'll say, Okay, now I just want you to listen. I don't want you to say anything. Like a conversation can be controlled, And I stop it right there.
Right.
I say, No, that's not how conversations go. Just tell me what you want to say. And I'm starting it right at the beginning of the conversation saying, You're not going to dominate and you're not going to tell me what to do. And it works. It works. She doesn't do this to me anymore. And like I just said before, our relationship is the best it's ever been. It really is. And boundaries really work. They work with children. I can testify to that as a teacher. They want boundaries, children. And it does nothing but set them up for success in life when you have boundaries, because you're able to navigate the world a little bit better. Because my sister is not yelling at me and blaming me for stuff, I'm not as upset. I'm not angry. And also, I think coming to our meetings, I realize I have no control over what's going on in that house.
Right.
No control. And so I have to stop worrying about it. And boy, was that freeing also. That was so freeing. But by making those boundaries, like if I could walk around with like a sign, like, with an airplane banner, draw boundaries, everybody, draw boundaries. I totally would, because my relationship with my sister and my brother-in-law is fantastic. And I also the way I present things, suggestions is also important as
Right.
well. And, try to be positive and praising. And it works. It really works.
It's amazing when you hear the difference in setting those boundaries and what those changes look like. Sometimes it's night and day, sometimes it's a slow process. You talked about the evolution of your relationship with your sister over the years. What would you like your relationship with your sister to look like in the future?
I think it's pretty great right now, and I would like it to continue this way. I don't have these expectations that she's going to be my best friend. I would just like her to continue to be sober and to be stable for her family. I feel for her, this disease of addiction. I'm just going to continue what I'm doing, which is to be there for my nephew, to be there for them. But I like our relationship right now, and I would like it to continue like this.
Right.
How about you? How about for you and your brother?
It's challenging because my brother's age difference, he's 19. So it is very much a trial and error right now. I've begun to build some of those boundaries as well. And for me, it's been kind of like a science project, like figuring out what I feel safe doing, what's working for me, and how I want to show up as a supportive sister. And really understanding what the role of a sibling is. Given everything that you've gone through with your family, how would you personally define the role of a sibling?
Ay, ay, ay.
I know it can be a loaded question.
Role of a sibling. I think it depends on each individual because, you could say, oh, the role of a sibling is to be there for your sibling. What does that mean? I think it's individualized. I don't know if I just used that word correctly. I think the role of a sibling is to make it your own path. I think I like that phrase from the Blue Book to be things and not do things, maybe.
Yeah.
Is that did I just get it right?
It's to
Yeah.
active
I
doing things for others, be things for them.
be things. Yeah, I think I like that. To be things, not to do things. I mean, sometimes you gotta do things, but for the most to be things for your sibling. I think that's the best way to be a sibling. My sister has shown up for me for sure in several very important ways that I will not forget. And the fact that she can acknowledge her shortcomings is showing up.
Being a sibling is a complicated role. Being a parent, sometimes that role and responsibility might sound pretty straightforward. It's like, oh, you have to bathe, protect, feed, and house your child. Some of the basic necessities, but there's so much more that goes into parenthood, being a mom, being a dad, and that gray area is like what that sibling is supposed to be. A lot of the times you hear siblings have phenomenal relationships, whether they're brothers and sisters, or sometimes horrible relationships, or somewhere in between. And I think what I really love about what you had said is that that relationship is going to be so different. So defining that role of a sibling is really going to vary on a case to case basis or family to family
Mm.
basis, right?
I want to say how very proud of my sister I am and how she doesn't give up and that she acknowledges her addiction now and she's really trying to work on her mental health issues, which is really difficult. I am just really proud of her. I think, that's how she's going to be there for everyone in her life.
During this journey, what have been some of the bigger inspirations of hope for you?
What my nephew being born was life changing. Being a parent is the toughest job in the world. I think that's been inspirational seeing my sister as a parent, seeing my brother in law as a parent. That gives me hope and makes me happy. And therapy, therapy, and sticking with it and going to meetings and being with people that validate you and your experiences and not negate them. Surrounding yourselves with healthy relationships, healthy people, and boundaries. I'm not sure if I mentioned boundaries, but boundaries.
We'll title the name of the episode Boundaries, as explained by Gillian. So we talked
So
a bunch about your experiences with your sister, your family from childhood, to adulthood up until present day. I'd love for you to close out with what you believe parents should know about raising children in a home where there's substance use and what the impact in adulthood could be if there's no early intervention.
I think drawing boundaries early, making it clear that substances are not welcome in the home. We all used to think, oh, pot, it's like nothing. Oh, they're sitting in their friend's basement. Oh, that's fine. They're having a drink. But to be ever vigilant and to not be in denial. I've said it, it is the toughest job in the world. And then you got to add that on top of it. But it's so, so important. I had a friend once who I think her son was about your brother's age, and he was drinking too much. I think he was smoking pot. I'm not sure what else he was smoking or doing. And she threw him out. She threw him out, and he had to make changes, and she didn't let him back in until he made changes. And I was just blown away with how she did that because it's so difficult.
Right.
Because as a parent, your role is a caretaker. Make them their favorite meal and keep them home tonight, then everything will be okay. Or if I make sure that they're breathing, like we've heard parents say, everything will be okay. It's not, and not to be afraid to branch out for mental help. I think the second you find out you're pregnant, I think you should head to a therapist office, head to some kind of support group, you know, and get support because it's so difficult and you need support for yourself, not just, to learn how to navigate those kind of waters
Right.
because nobody thinks their child's an alcoholic. Nobody thinks their child's an addict. And you just want to you turn your head and not see it. But if you do that, you're doing your child and all your other children a tremendous disservice by not teaching them that this is going to fuck up their life because it will. I mean, there's like experimenting with alcohol in college, and then there's straight up addiction. That's really hard to navigate. But I think for parents, just to get that support, be in some kind of I don't know, peer group. I don't know, parent of college kids group. I don't know, where you learn how to navigate what is acceptable, what is unacceptable.
Right.
I'm not saying you're not going to be able to control the addiction because they just might, no matter what they do, it might happen anyway. By my mom ignoring the addiction, it just made life a lot more difficult for my sister after she died, and no one was there to pick up the pieces anymore. And then my sister fell apart, unfortunately. And it's hard for the other children who just kind of watch and don't get recognized as much. I mean, recognize, that's the wrong word. Well, maybe it's the right word. But it's draining. It's draining. Addiction is draining for everyone.
It's the importance of being seen as a person apart from just being a child or a sibling. You just want to be seen for who you are. And I think that sometimes gets lost in the shuffle when there's so much other chaos going on in a family because of someone's
Yes.
mental health challenges, substance use, or whatever it else it might be. Other forms of addiction manifest in other ways. And there's a lot of baggage that comes with that sometimes.
What I am learning in therapy, and I continue to learn, that addiction is usually coping with other kind of issues,
Right.
perhaps try and cope with mental health issues or just not dealing with your anxiety, your social anxiety, or whatever it is. I would say for parents, look out for all of this stuff and try not to be afraid of mental health.
Right now, there's a huge shift in like the language that we use for talking about addiction and alcoholism just because it is a substance use disorder. And when you can understand and accept what a substance use disorder is, you really get to see how it becomes a coping mechanism. And I think a lot of people have this misconception that you can just stop. And while some people might be able to, it's really not a common thing. And there's so much that goes into treatment the same way you would treat diabetes or cancer. There are other ways to treat substance use disorders.
Yeah, it's very true. I would like to see more people getting mental health help.
Right. One question that we haven't really touched on is you've been going to Nar family groups. And what has that experience done for you? And how did you get to the point where you decided you wanted to start going to some of those meetings?
Well, it's the validation. I just remember one of the first meetings I went to where they talked about the chaos in the home. It just hit me in the chest oh my God, yes, these people get it. They know it. And I never really put a title on it or a label, I should say, of chaos in the home. Just chaos all the time. And it was exhausting. So that validation of you're not alone. You're not the only person who thought that it didn't realize that there was a substance abuse problem and that, you suffered the consequences of it. I had been to an Al-Anon meeting, and it wasn't for me. There was too much language that I didn't really understand, language that I understand more now, I think. But there was way too much language like qualifier and all this other stuff. And they told me I had to read a book before I go to a meeting. I can't do any more work. But then I have some good friends and they go to meetings and I've been sober a long time. And I was complaining, you know, not complaining really, but just talking about my sister and how and her struggles. And my one very good friend said, "You should come to this Naranon meeting tonight. I'm speaking." And that my other friend said, "I'll go with you." And to me, what a gift to
Right.
say, just I'll go with you. I don't know any of these people. It's not my problem, but I'm going to go with you. Ugh. I went to this hour meeting and I'm there with my friend. And the last 15 minutes are reserved for sharing your story. And I just talked a little bit about what was going on in my life. And I just remember people saying, "Keep coming back, keep coming back."
Yeah.
And it was so encouraging
Yeah.
and so warm. And what I liked is that they were mostly parents in the Naranon meetings. And as an older sibling, significantly older sibling, I took on more of a parent role sometimes, and I felt much more comfortable with other parents rather than with spouses, and that was it. It was a gift. It was a gift to just come and have validation and talk about and my experience and have support of the people in our group and to meet people like you.
Oh, thank you. And I think right there, it shows like the power of community, whether it's school, work, friendships, a Naranon meeting, is just having that community and that camaraderie for people that understand what you're going through is so validating. And I think that goes to show the power of relationships, whether they're ones that we're born into or ones that we foster. They play such an essential part of who we are and who we become. I think that's what's important about having some of these conversations, like the one we're having now, is about reflecting on how some of those challenges you've experienced are so deeply intertwined with what we've been conditioned or brought up to believe, and unlearning a little bit of some of those ideologies and like moving out of that survival mode.
Yes, unlearning. What a great word.
Yeah, we've been our bodies really hold on to all of that stress and tension, and it's like really forcing us to unlearn and get comfortable with the uncomfortable and pushing us out of those comfort zones of ours. And I think it's so encouraging to see you sitting up here, Jillian, and you know, having figured out what you want your relationships and your life to look like. Because there are so many families, particularly siblings, who just need some of that hope and to know that recovery for themselves is possible, regardless of what that journey might look like. So I just want to thank you so much for, coming on the show and sharing your story as it relates to you and your family.
My pleasure. I'm happy to help others in any way possible as I have been helped. Pass it on.
Pass the torch. Thank you for listening to this episode of For Love of Recovery. If you enjoyed this episode, please share the link with someone else you believe will enjoy it too. If you're looking to have deeper conversation around your siblings' use of drugs or alcohol, join our Facebook group, Siblings for Love of Recovery.